I'm Paige. I'm the head of community at the Nature Tech Collective. And every month we're bringing together experts in our community who are harnessing technology to regenerate our natural world. Throughout this year and this content arc that we're setting up, we've been building the foundations of understanding nature tech fundamentals. So we started with Nature Tech 101, went into the technologies that exist in nature tech and the regulations, and now we're kind of in this project implementation phase. Today, we're diving into a case study of agricultural technology deployment through the lens of smallholder farmer empowerment and climate resilient agriculture. So it's a multi-stakeholder collaboration between Carbon Mint and several others that you'll hear about to build predictive agricultural advisory systems and digital MRV infrastructure. So we're going to explore a few key themes today. One, the unique challenges of implementing nature tech with smallholder farmers in India. Two, the process of building trust between technology providers and farming communities. Three, the technical aspects of integrating ground sensors, drone technology, satellite imagery for comprehensive agriculture monitoring. And four, the economic models that make these projects viable despite complex policy landscapes in India. We're also going to discuss how this ecosystem approach balances immediate farmer advisory needs with long-term carbon sequestration goals, but also the collaborative partnerships that are making this possible across continents, which is very cool. So really happy to welcome Vijay from Carbon Mint today, who's been instrumental in developing these integrated agricultural technology solutions, and who's also kind of putting out a call for collaborations today. So thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive into the specifics of this project, of this case study, can you please introduce yourself and Carbon Mint, and just give us a quick overview of the case study that we're going to be talking about today?
Sure. I thank you so much, Paige, and all the hosts, and thanks for everyone for joining this session. I think it's a wonderful thing to kind of talk to so much diverse set of audience that Paige always talks about. So myself, I'm Vijay. I'm actually primarily a technology person. So I was with Microsoft for over 2 decades. So I built a lot of platforms, the Azure cloud that some of you might be familiar with or not. You can blame me for that if some of the tooling and services that we built in Microsoft. So I was responsible for some of the storage technologies as well as compute technologies. But in the last, I would say 4 years, I've been spending more time on the application of those technologies for various sectors. So I work with energy, when I say energy, specifically oil exploration, seismic, and all of that. And then I also work with manufacturing and agriculture. So I'm very fascinated and excited about the sort of bringing data from multiple domains together to really solve, world problems. I mean, it's not world hunger problem, but I think there is a lot of impact that we can bring by bringing data from various endpoints as well as people. So one of the things that we'll be talking about in this session is also about how to take an ecosystem approach to solve some of these problems, because no one company or no one expert can solve all the problems. So I think we need experts. And we'll be doing a call to action to see how many experts in this group can help build some of that, learn from each other, from what we've seen in various areas. So that's about me. And Carbon Mint, it was started in 2022. It was actually, I was not the initial founder, but I have been working with the founders for the last 2 years already, in the sense of, trying to set it up, help, thinking about the business models and stuff like that while I was still with Microsoft. But the idea was, how do you really bring regenerative agriculture, into a mainstream? That was the idea with which it started. But essentially, what the founders, my colleagues who are not here in this call, they found out that it's very important to really think about two aspects. One is the sound economics behind the model, whatever model that you come up with, number one. Number two, it's also critical that we have technology infusion. So without those two things, we're not going to be able to get further. I mean, it might sound very, obvious, but I think any effort that we do in terms of sustainability has to work both economically sustainable as well. And especially with the context that, with the large number of small holding farmers in India, which is probably a unique situation that we have in India. So that's the sort of the context with which we started. So it started as a technology company. So we built a lot of digital tech. None of us are actually farmers, the founders. But we're learning about farming ourselves, and we are looking at how to really bring our expertise and technology into farming. But that said, there's some experience. One of the founders has had a small farm. We're doing integrated farming, so we have some experience in that. So what we're doing is essentially looking at, okay, how do we bring down the cost of production for crops, and then at the same time doing it in a way that is environmentally friendly, and hopefully we're able to get carbon credits or some kind of biodiversity going on there, right? So we'll not spend too much time into how we do the carbon credits in this call, but I'm happy to have another session. But essentially, if you want to do it in an economically and ecologically friendly way, that's really the mantra. So that's the context with which we have started, and I think we're at a stage where we have a lot of the digital pieces together. But we're also looking at what else we need to do to kind of round out the solution, because it's very critical that the farmer acceptance is there. Number one. Number two, it has to sustain above and beyond our lifetime, because even we are coming in doing this farming and advisory, and when we leave, like in a year or two, the farmer must be able to continue that that effort or whatever that pattern that they're following. So that is very critical. Otherwise, it's not going to be sustain. And if you regress, it's not good. So that's the context. So this is the sort of the mindset with which we work, and we can talk more about other things. So do you want me to introduce the project page? Or
Yes, please.
okay,
Just an overview of the project, but then
sure,
also, yeah, why don't you dive deeper? What problem are you trying to solve? Who are the
sure,
players involved? All
yeah,
that sort of stuff.
yeah. Okay, so let me do this. Let me switch to my slides. So I'm trying to share.
By the way, everything that you're saying is definitely very aligned with the Nature Tech Collective's thinking in general. So that's good news.
Yeah.
You're up.
So we talked about the challenges at a high level, right? So we have sector level issues, agri-sector level issues. Obviously, there's a huge, loss of biodiversity, soil health degradation that we're seeing over several decades. And this is not just a problem in India. We're seeing that in other countries as well. So we went to a conference in Thailand last few weeks ago. We're seeing the same thing. So it's not a unique problem for India, but that's a major issue. The water resource depletion is actually a major issue, because even though we have a lot of rains, the standing water and having that available is becoming a premium, right? And obviously, some of the crops like rice is one of those that we're going to talk about. We have a huge need for water. But one of the key things we're trying to solve is how do you reduce the use of water in rice cultivation, and then we need to combat the climate crisis while making sure that there's no issue of food security. Because you can say, okay, oh, why are we growing rice if rice is a problem? We have to feed everybody, right? So and there's a growing need for rice cultivation and rice production, so we have to do that. But at the same time, we need to make sure we solve the agri sector level problems, right? And at the bottom, if you see the farmer level, right, obviously, they care about nature, they care about the soil health and water, but for them, it's actually more about the farm level issues, right? How do I reduce the cost of production? How do I reduce the use of chemicals? I mean, chemicals are bad not just for the health, but also it costs money. So if they are able to protect their crops from pests and stuff like that without having to use a lot of chemicals and any alternatives, that's actually very welcome, right? And then use of water. Today, in a lot of places, at least in India, water is available because of the government intervention. But if there's some day where the water stops because of the government is not able to provide the water, then there's going to be a huge whiplash on like how these cultivation practices are going to happen. The second issue for the farmer is human resources. So a lot of times, there is a shortage of humans, even though there are a lot of people. You need to get people at the right time, right? And that's very critical because timing is everything in farming. So you have a 60-day crop window. You have to do your intercultivation activities at the right time. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. So there's surge of activities, and you need to have the right kind of support at that time, right? And then you need to also think about women empowerment. The reason this is important is a lot of the farmers, even though the land title is not on women because it's a family, they work as a family. They do a lot of heavy lifting, in the rural areas, whereas the husband or someone is actually maybe migrated to the urban areas and doing multiple jobs. So that's a situation. So we need to make sure whatever solution we come up with is working for the women as well. And then the financial aspect, where it's working capital being available for smallholder farmers, and then be able to get the kind of market access. So these are the challenges at the farmer level. So what we're trying to do at Carbon Mint is to look at solving the top and the bottom, but the way we want to do it at the cluster level. So the way we are approaching the whole community is through what we call as farmer producer organizations and self-help groups, which kind of form a cluster. So you might have heard about the sort of the milk as being a very important and a great case study for India, where we produce a lot of milk. We have this Amul brand. You might have heard about it. You can look it up if you want. So it works as a cooperative, right? So the way they all farmers are, part owners of that company. And so they actually work, in that sense. So we want to really look at the cluster level for two reasons. One is it gets the right kind of resource efficiency. And second is we're able to provide services or, do governance at a group level, which is easier to do from governance and operations, right? So those are the two reasons why we want to look at it from a cluster level. So that's the sort of the context of the problem. So now let me just jump into ACRAT itself, the problem that we're going to talk about. I just stopped sharing just to switch a few slides. Just give me 1 second. Here it is. So at ACRAT, ACRAT is one of the projects that we're working on. And this is done in partnership with Fraunhofer University. It's actually an institute in Germany. And they are actually doing a lot of overseeing this project. We have research faculty who's helping us with the design of the decision support systems and stuff like that on the back end. So essentially the goal is, to provide a climate resilient agriculture and get the right kind of decision support for the farmers, right? So we talked about the whole context of the agri sector level issues, but the farmer level issues, and then really given this is sort of a research kind of oriented project, there is actually a lot of push to make sure that we're following an ecosystem approach, because as I said, one company cannot solve it all, not Carbon Mint, not another company. We have to take an ecosystem approach. So the idea is to really create an innovation ecosystem, right, that brings a lot of partners together to solve a problem in a holistic way, right? So we'll talk about some of those partners in just a minute. And then the last piece is really to help the farmers themselves, right, with the right kind of digital literacy and farmer education, and give them the right kind of tools, right? So this just gives you a sort of a dashboard or glimpse of what this particular project is talking about, although we're working on several other projects in other areas. So here it talks about like 55 farmers. Kharif, by the way, is the season that we refer to. That's the monsoon season where we have a cultivation. That's the name of Kharif. So we have about 55 farmers, 55 land parcels. The registered areas 305 acres. And here it's primarily talking about paddy. So the one that I talked about, the rice being an important crop, but at the same time has a lot of challenges with respect to methane emissions, nitrous oxide emissions. For those who are not familiar, methane, if you think about carbon dioxide, which is one of the biggest pollutant, we all talk about it, methane is actually 25 times more polluting than carbon dioxide. So from a metric perspective, it's 25x of carbon. So we're talking about mitigating that much extent of carbon dioxide. I mean, that's an equivalence, that they talk about. That is what we want to mitigate. So that's going to make a huge impact on the climate itself, right? And then we're talking about, this dashboard just kind of shows you like, okay, how does the solution look like? So I'll not go into the details of the solution. In this slide, we'll come to this a little later. But what we do is essentially work with a bunch of partners. So here, it kind of talks about a lot of partners here, but I'll just call out a few that are very important in this slide. One is Pranadhara. Pranadhara is the one that actually provides the agronomy practices that talks about how to reduce the cost of cultivation. So you think about a recipe book that kind of gives you that information. Then we have Krishi Tantra, that's on the right-hand side. I should have circled it. They actually help with the soil testing. Even soil sense is another one that helps with that. So there are two sort of people working on the soil testing. So that's another element that comes in. So we need to see at the end of this whole project for 3 years, what is the quality of soil before and in between and after that project is done. So that's very important. ACRAT itself is one of the partners. So I kind of partners for us, but they are sort of sponsoring this whole project. We have Delta Things, which works on IoT devices. So there are two kinds of use cases for IoT. One is, they use something called light traps, which help in doing pest control without using chemicals. So they think about a simple solar powered light traps that are, is somewhere in the farm, and that, attracts, insects so that they are able to, not kill them. Actually, they just get stuck to it without killing, the hurting them. At the same, we're also protecting the crops, right? So, and not doing any spraying or some kind of artificial thing. Then we also have Bharat Rohan. Bharat Rohan, you see in the bottom right there, that works on the drone technology. So we'll talk about some of the drone use cases. And then we have NCML. NCML helps us with the satellite imagery. So those are some of the key partners that I want to talk about in this slide. And then we also partner with, the Rice Research Institute. So those are the partners that work with us, right, in terms of giving us the APIs to really help us, with what kind of recommendations we could give for the farmers, right? So this is sort of gives you a high-level overview of the ACRAT project and our company, and then maybe we can switch to other questions page, maybe if
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And what a conglomerate. I wish I had time to ask you how exactly you created relationships with all of these people, but I think it'd be great to talk a little bit more, yeah, just in the interest of time about, okay, so we have smallholder farmers in India, there are particular challenges around that. Maybe paint a picture of what it's like trying to build trust with these farmers, trying to get them to engage with this technology, but actually really get into what technology we're talking about, what's happening now on the ground.
Yeah. So go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. So let me just, do a few slides on like how we are solving the problem. And then I will talk about the technology itself. Just give me 1 second. Let me switch to that slide mode. Sorry about that.
All good.
Okay. So here we are. So we spoke about rice. We spoke about the emission issues and the stuff that comes up. And then we talk about the farmer issues itself, right? So that's the high level context setting, and then the ACRAT project. So now we can ask, okay, so what is so unique? What is Carbon Mint actually doing? Why is this a problem? Why is it not already solved problem? Right? That would be the common question that somebody might ask. Okay, so the answer is two parts. Okay, one, there is actually an existing methodology called DSR, which is called dry seeded rice. I'll not go into too much detail, but I'll just say there's two methodologies: the transplantation based, and then there's dry seeded rice. By the way, dry seeded rice is the one that is used by ancient people, maybe 4 decades ago or 5 decades ago. But everyone switched to transplantation because there was actually better yield, and some of those challenges were sort of not there, with transplantation. But that said, there's a converse problem now with transplantation. You actually need to maintain water level in the fields for a longer time, right? And that actually is one of the reasons why we have significant methane issue, because methane, you don't need to have standing water in the fields for all the time, the entire 60-day or 75-day crop cycle. So if you're able to reduce that, you're doing two things. One is you're solving the water problem. Second is you're able to do this with less methane and nitrous oxide emission. It needs standing water at certain stages of the crop, but not the entire stage, right? So that's the problem one. So the DSR is, you could think of as the magic pill here, right? This is basically, dry seeded rice is really what DSR stands for. But that said, it still requires, significant labor costs, right? And there's a major issue with DSR with the weeds, right? So that's where the interventions come in. So one, with the labor costs, what we're doing is working with Pranadhara. We're actually coming up with the sort of the recipe which helps the farmer to reduce the cost of cultivation. A, by doing mechanization, okay? B, the mechanization is done in a business model that is amortized across a cluster of farmers. That's the part we were talking about earlier, right? So why the cluster level is important is we are doing it in a way that we're doing it at a cluster level so that the cost of that intervention is not borne by one farmer, right? So that's going to be very important from economics perspective, right? And the second, it also solves the problem of the labor. So we talked about the labor issues, having the spike issues. So with this, you can actually do lot many acres in a day, with mechanization, which you cannot do otherwise. So that's the key. And the reason why this is interesting in India is because in other countries, like if you take US, for example, we have very large farms, like 100 acres, 50 acres. That's like not a big number, right? Here we're talking about 0.4 acres or less than an acre, right? So you need to have a cluster level solution that works at that point. So that's problem number one. Second, we're looking at is how do you do this planning and execution in a very systematic way. So first, you need to have the right, the recipe that everyone has to follow in a certain way. So that planning and implementation is important. Second is it needs to make sure that it is done in a digital native way, because that's the only way. I mean, this is probably more modern statement, because if you're thinking, I mean, ages ago, agriculture was not a business. It was more of a way of life, a tradition. And now we're looking at agriculture as a business. So now if you have to do this, you have to do it in a digital way so that you're able to, A, improve your own practice. Okay. But more importantly, if you're about to claim that you produced a sustainable rice with less water usage, you need to actually have to prove that. That's where we're bringing digital technology, and we're using blockchain. And we'll talk about a little bit about how the solution looks like to really solve that problem of, proof. So it also acts as a proof platform, the digital, right? The last piece is about the access to finance and economic marketing support. This is something that will work in progress that we're still looking at. But the whole idea is if we're able to facilitate, somebody to fund that project at a cluster level, that cost can be amortized. So we're looking at people who can fund, provide the either climate finance or hybrid finance to be able to, procure those mechanization equipments and be able to serve it across a large section of farmers, right? So it could be like 400 acres or 100 acres in one cluster. That's kind of the sizing that we've come up with, right? So that's the main sort of elements of how we're looking at the problem solution statement, right? So, yeah. So just again coming back, right? So we're looking at how do you solve this for the agri businesses, FPOs and SHGs, which is the cluster that I talked about, and look at it from an impact and outcome oriented rather than doing point solution. Because many of the things I spoke about in earlier slide, there are solutions for pest control, for soil testing, for but they don't all work together. So we want to create that ecosystem. That's where the important part comes in, right? And then just to kind of set the stage, these are the elements of our overall solution, which has the elements of mechanization, farming, and the carbon, but we're also looking at how to bring in the elements of financial and market linkage. The bottom of the stack is really all about the digital services that really enable that package of practices, resource management, and the traceability and the MRV that sort of support some of that, workflows. I'll not go into this slide because it just talks a little details on the service offering, but just to give you a perspective of the digital platform and how it looks like, and how these various players come in. So the digital platform, as I told you earlier, is actually does two things. One is it actually codifies the recipe or the agronomy practice that we got from Pranadhara, the partner. Second is it creates a traceability or sort of a proof platform for the whoever is consuming that data, right? So on the left-hand side, you have the inputs. So the inputs are, think about data acquisition, right? And there could be multiple ways of data acquisition. One is through mobile phones. So we have a mobile app that the farmer or field officer can use, and that can be used for doing the geofencing, tracing that whole land and stuff. And it can also be used to collecting evidences like photographs with geotag, so that you know when and where you took that picture, so you can actually provide that as a proof. You also have data acquisition from satellites. So we work with NCML as well as Marut drone and Bharat Rohan to capture the spectral images from the land, as well as the soil sensing. From the farmer perspective, it looks like this, right? So they don't actually need to know all of these players. Basically, they work with us. So they bring the data, and then we integrate with them. And so for the farmer, they don't know that there's so many people working together. So ultimately, the data lands in our platform, and then that's what gets surfaced on the other side. And then we have the package of practice on the left-hand side, which is another kind of input. So here we're talking about rice. So it has a certain package of practice, and it has to be customized for every, think about every geography. So some locations may have a certain patterns of practices because of certain availability of water or things, and then some may not have. So that's very important to make that codification customizable so that you are able to use it in a particular hyperlocal conditions. Then the digital records. This is where all the data gets captured and collected, right? So we have assets. We may map the entire area. We also map the other facilities you might have, like the storage facility and stuff like that, so that we're able to track the entire field operations. Think about like a digital twin of that, the platform. And then the traceability, which is about that all the transactions and then the results of the whole operation that gets stored in blockchain. That's in the digital records. Output, right? So these are the three types of consumptions. One, in the bottom, I have just think about simple reporting analytics, right? I said simple just because, not because it's easy. It's because it's something that you can reflect on. Okay, so as a cluster, they can see how are they performing against the goals. So if you think about like KPIs or something, right? Like how much water I thought I'm going to use and how much I actually reduced. They can use that for sort of simple comparisons, right? And then we are also integrating ACRAT project, so that is able to provide even more insights, like the farmer support, advisory, and stuff. So that's why we have sort of so consumer of that data could be not just the farmer or the cluster, but someone else outside who can give more insights. Then we also have the use case of quality labels. So the same traceability data in blockchain is also used as a QR code. So when you scan the batch, the product label, the batch, right, you get the full information about where is this produce coming from, when was it seeded, when was it harvested, what was the process followed. So it's almost like self-attestation of your process without depending on certification. I mean, certification is good to have, but it's like more like self-attestation. So, but the way we have this is, with blockchain, we're getting the implicit trust with the data, right? So that's the second piece. And third use case is the carbon reporting itself. So for carbon markets, you probably be familiar with this. There are two kinds of markets. There's a carbon offset market and a carbon inset market. The offset market is somebody who's able to buy carbon credits in exchange for whatever pollution they do, right? So think about it this way. So if I'm a steel industry or a cement industry, I may not be able to mitigate the carbon myself because my industry is inherently polluting. I can't do anything about it, right? So what I as a steel industry can invest in another company which is trying to bring the carbon emissions lower or removing them. So you must have seen the other presentation on blue carbon from Bridgewater that they did. So that actually removes carbon or reduces carbon. Same way here, you can actually have this kind of a trading mechanism where I can go buy carbon credits for offsetting the emissions that I'm making, right? So that's the market that's opening up. It's already there in some parts of the world, but in India, we have just in March they announced the opening up of that portal. So this is another way to get incentives for the farmers, right? So above and beyond reducing cost of cultivation, they also can trade those credits back to the to someone else who's funding it, so that they can get maybe additional income for the good work that they're doing. So it's really about rewarding responsible behavior for the farmers. That's where this whole carbon credit comes into play. So this is how the system works. As you can see on the left hand side and on the right hand side, there are many players. I kind of put them, just sprinkle the several partners. So this is how it works. So the IoT devices, the Delta things, Soil Sense, all these folks bring in the data from various sources based on the project scope. We have research bodies like Rice Research Institute and Pranadhara bring in the sort of the package of practices, and then we have the digital system. And then on the consumption side, you have auditors, it could be carbon projects, you could have consumers, discerning consumers who know, who care about buying responsible products, can use the same labels, the quality label, to really buy responsible products. So this is how, at a very high level, the solution looks like. I mean, I can do a demo, but I'm sure we'll run out of time. But
We will.
this is this is the sort of the crux of it. So maybe we can move on to other questions.
Yeah, no,
Paige.
that's really interesting and a great diagram. I had no idea that India was still kind of so nascent in the carbon credit market. So I don't know, I guess quite interesting too. But yeah, I'd love to leave time for the Q&A. So I think what makes most sense to get into right now then, and we'll have the Q&A in about 10 minutes. So 10 minutes left. What do we need to talk about? You've talked about sorry, call for partners is what we're really trying to get to here, but that was also in the context of some of the new technologies you're trying to implement, like hyperspectral imaging for soil sensing. Why don't you get to that? And then we have a bunch of questions in the chat popping up that you can actually get to.
Sure, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, right? So I'll answer one other question which Paige you asked in the last time, and I didn't answer it fully. So from the farmer perspective, the way we want to engage is really make sure that they are taken care of at the cost of production. So that's how we engage. We don't talk about carbon. We don't talk about all the fancy credits and all that stuff. We're not talking about money, giving them any money or anything, right? So the only way we say them is, okay, here is an approach that you can use to save your cost of production. And you can start with maybe doing some percentage of land. Don't take the entire, so, I mean, I know it's doesn't work for a 0.4 acre land, but we pick somebody who says, let's say 2 acres or 3 acres, and say we could get one third of it. Maybe we'll start with DSR, right? So that's kind of how we do it. And then once they see that, and then they kind of talk about it. So we create this sort of consortiums, or I mean, this is a natural SHG and FPO, which I talked about earlier, farmer producer organizations. They are the ones that help us facilitate those conversations to say, okay, let's do it on a trial. So that's how we start, right? And we have shown that in about 5,000 acres in another district in in India. So we're also taking farmers there to show them, hey, this is how we've done it. Again, it's not rocket science. I mean, if they start to see it, but it's not so much about it's more about convincing them and making sure that they don't have any risks. So this is an area where I talked about financial part, right? So they need to have either if they have three acres, 1 acre, they can allocate for this, so that's fine. But for a very small farmer, I think one of the things that challenges we have even today is how do you make sure that we do it in a risk-free way, right? So can somebody as a financer, like a climate finance, absorb the risk of anything going wrong? I mean, with the operations, right? Because we're doing some changes, and they are able to, But if on the upside, if they make more money or reduce the cost of cultivation, then they can take some money away from, So that way, we'll make it attractive for the financer, so that they are able to finance this kind of projects, that they can maybe buy carbon credits. Maybe they can just take that part of it from them, or get some of the pie of the share for themselves. But at the same time, if things go south, they get the farmers protected. So you need to make sure we make it sort of interesting for the farmer as well as the financer. So that's one of the areas that we're still working on. So making it risk-free is very important. So that's the first question. I think I didn't answer that fully last time. So talking about the hyperspectral, right? So as you can tell, some of these carbon projects and proving that you're doing the right thing, responsible thing, can take a long time. So it can take 3 years, 7 years, because it does take time, right? So one of the things that we're looking at doing, and I spoke to some folks even in the Nature Tech Collective, is can we find early indicators of the trending, I should say, about the soil health and water health, before it actually happens to the fullest extent, right? So we want to look for leading indicators, right? So that's the sort of the journey we are in right now. So, and here is where we could use some approaches. One of the papers that we read is how can we use maybe a combination of some calibrated data on the field. Let's say you have, picked up soil samples from some pilot field, and map their sort of. I'll talk about what hyperspectral is in just a minute, but think about it as some kind of imaging technology which is above and beyond what a satellite can give you. So satellite does 10 meters. It can give you every 5 days, capture, but it can only do about 13 colors. So hyperspectral can give you more colors, so it's like a continuous band, and you use drones and things like that to take a photograph of that at a hyperspectral imagery. So the idea is use the imaging technology and calibrate it with the soil samples that we've taken, and use that to extrapolate what is the soil health in a larger area. So that's point number one. Point number two, what are the indicators? For example, we're looking at metagenomics or some approach to see if there's better biodiversity or better microbial activity in the soil. If you're able to find out those indicators, all right, and that can also be mapped to see what is the hyperspectral image signature associated with the biodiversity thing. We should be able to say, okay, if there's better improved biodiversity, the soil quality is going to improve over maybe in a year, right? So we're looking for such early indicators that we can take from the soil samples, whether it is biodiversity indicators, microbial activity, and create a spectral image or some kind of a signature that can be used. And then we see how that signature evolves, so that we don't have to take soil samples frequently, because that, as you can tell, it's very laborious and very time consuming. So that's one of the things that we're looking at, and we're looking to actively partner with somebody who's done this already, or develop something like that. But we're working with NCML currently to work on some of those elements. So that's an area of some work that we're doing, a little deeper on, doing this.
Amazing. Well, Vijay, I suggest we open the conversation then, see if anyone in this call has any ideas. And then you can start answering some questions directly to as well that are in the chat. Zara, if you don't mind unmuting uh, this audience, and I'm going to go back to the gallery view, the wall of faces. Yeah, thank you so much. That was so pedagogic. I understood everything. And really interesting to see kind of like the whole process that you're building there. So I think Steve asked a first question. Um, do you want to voice it out loud, Steve? Anything to add to it?
No, I was just curious why I noticed that all your units are in acres, and I was just curious if India is you. Because again, believe it or not, it's such a simple thing like just common units is really a complex thing. In
Yeah, we
large,
use acres and hectares interchangeably. I mean, we sometimes switch the units as needed, depending on who we're talking to. Yes, but I left my slide as acres because that's what we use in here locally. So yeah.
outside the United States, I mean, the United States uses acres. Outside the United States, almost all large scale or anybody uses hectares.
Yeah.
And then in China, they use mu, which is a specific unit. And in South America, they use the family farms, the smaller units. They use all these different local.
I'll tell you a funny reason for that actually. So we were like in British colony about 75 years ago. So you know that, right? So a lot of the units are still lingering. That's one of the reasons. But that said, a lot of the European countries have moved out of that and they gone to metric fully. We still have some lingering uh, effects of that. But yes, we have by and large mostly metric. So yeah, good question. I think Gilad had a question on the business model. Yeah, this is a great question. Actually, one of my favorite questions, right? So there are two models that we have today, right? And as you can tell, the question is so great because it's a complex, ecosystem play, and how does everyone get a share of the pie, right? So we think about our product broadly into two buckets or two tiers, right? One tier is just a technology piece, which is like, okay, the blockchain and digital records and mobile app, cloud app, reporting, validation, that kind of stuff, right? So that we charge like a subscription fee, just like any SaaS software, per acre, per year, or per hectare. Maybe one day we'll switch to that, Steve, to hectares. So yeah, so that's sort of one base product, right?
All right,
And
that's
of
to
course
the
you can,
farmers.
yeah. And then there's also the element of maybe if they have an add-ons like DMRV for carbon, we may charge a little extra on top of that, right? So that's just one base model. But then what we're also evaluating and evolving more, I would say, is a model where if we were to provide this comprehensively, right? We could look at it as, okay, can we charge something like, because ultimately the product that is coming out of this farm gate has to be sold somewhere, right? That's where the real money happens, right? So we're able to say something like, okay, this is how much it costs per ton of produce, right? And everything included. So our costs, the cost of the other interventions like the soil testing, everything included, that makes it the most interesting from the telling the story perspective, right? Of course, we have to look at the different line items and make sure that everyone has the fair share of things. But essentially, that's the way we can communicate to the impact investors, the buyers of this produce. So if we can say, okay, per ton of rice, this is the cost per ton per unit of emission, right? That's really what we want to say. Emission avoided or mitigated, right? That would be the holy grail we want to get to, right? And we can say this is a sustainably grown rice. This is the cost for it. And then if we can get a premium, and we hope we will, and we have some evidence to say that that can happen. But then based on that, we look at all of our costs, and we include our costs in that. So that's sort of the two at a high level, the business model, that way it works. Kiran.
Vijay, and you're focusing first on the Indian market?
Yeah. So from the producer side, it's Indian market,
Yeah,
but the consumer could be an export.
sure. But how much could you charge realistically? How much could you charge an Indian farmer for this tech?
We don't. Okay, so that's what. So we don't want to. That's okay. That's part of the rice business model question. So we don't want to charge the farmer directly. So that's very important principle, because no farmer is actually going to buy anything. I mean, they only buy what is necessary for just the raw cultivation, right? So the way it has to work is work with the agribusiness or the farmer producer organization. So they are the ones who would have to pay us for that cluster, right? That's number one. Number two, for them, the way they want to trade is, okay, this is my cost, okay, of doing so many hectares of rice production that produce so many tons of rice or whatever that produces. It doesn't. I said rice many times, but you can get the idea, right? So you're able to produce that. That's what they're going to sell to whoever the consumer is, whether it's an export market or internal, company that's trading rice or whatever grains. So for them, so they're going to charge the buyer for that, and then that bill of materials should include digital interventions, soil interventions, all of that. So that's the way we want to do it.
Two last really quick questions. Is part of the business model also then offering either the end buyer, like say, I don't know, Nestle, insetting / are you also considering partnering with a project developer for the carbon offsets / insetting as well?
Yes. Yeah, inset is very, very attractive. The reason I say that is because two reasons actually. One is it sort of makes the storytelling very simple, because it's easy to understand from the outside perspective, right? Second thing I see is the cost of registry doing this carbon credits is very, very expensive. So you need to have much larger scales for us to be able to, make that cost of doing this carbon credits worth it, right? Because at the end of the day, you may get 1,000 rupees, which is like the equivalent of, say, purchasing power wise is about $10, right? Although it's currency wise, it's not $10, but you get the idea, right? So it's like it's not worth it if you were to go do that. So I believe, this is my personal conviction, is better to not depend on the registry based carbon projects, because just the whole process of registering is very high. So actually the government is looking at, can we kind of create these sort of even larger clusters so that they don't have to do this processing multiple times for each cluster, and further reduce the cost of registration, right? And this really comes into play only when you're trying to trade between countries. So if let's say, a steel producer in, say, China wants to buy, offset credits from somebody in India who's doing rice cultivation, right? So that's when it really matters. But if you're doing within the local market, you don't. So I think those are so my personal choice is insets, but I know there is a standard for registry and stuff, but the cost of that registry is actually pretty large, and that's one of the challenges we have. So we are focusing on doing the right thing for the farmer and the ecology, and then look at the carbon credits as a icing on the cake, and not hinge or peg our business model just on the carbon credits being available. That's very important lesson that we learned in the last year.
And by the way, Vijay, soil as a question is one of the big ones that the mother foundation of Nature Tech Collective has, right? Nature X and Gilad, you've been looking into soil with gig and things like that, and a lot of those questions. Do you have any ideas about this hyperspectral imaging, or have you ever heard about that methodology for soil testing?
Steve might be a better person to answer that one, but just really quick thing. Yeah, Steve should definitely give insights. But Vijay, are you connected with Soul Forest and KT?
Yeah.
I should. I guess I should. Yeah. I no, I have not. Yeah.
Let's make that happen for sure if they're not
I
official.
could have sworn you came through Soul Forest. But okay, yeah, let's make that happen. Well, we do have
Yeah.
one. Go for it, Steve, first.
No, I was just following up on Gilad's
Yeah.
comment. The big challenge is ground truthing. The cost of ground truthing for the spectral range is really it's a major barrier right now, especially when there's no real accepted way of measuring carbon. There's a lot of questions like the traditional Wiley Black method, and so there's a gap that has to be there's a gap still missing on that whole spectral imaging side of it.
Maybe a gap we can address at some point.
Yes, we have Nature Tech Collective, so we'll collectively, hopefully, yeah, these are good problems, and this is exactly one of the reasons, Paige, I was saying, we can learn from each other, and maybe we find some solutions. So, so I'd love to, look at other connections in this
For
group
sure.
to see, how we could solve
And
it collectively.
and the other point is the scaling issue. You said, like, for example, when you have you're talking about a large farm in India is 3 acres, or in a banana plantation or sugarcane plantation, a large is 500 hectares. So the scales are a lot. There's a scaling issue.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's
I mean,
that's
the
another
other thing
that's
is
a distance from the
diversity.
carbon
Yeah.
side.
Yeah, there's a diversity of scale issue also. So we have some very large farms, and then we have very small farms too. So in the just to add on Gilad's question, the other thing is the only way we can do this carbon sort of projects with registration is do it as clusters. So we need to bring several farmers together. Like say 500 acres or 500 1,000 acres, whatever, right? So that make sure that the cost is per thing is reduced, amortization, and also, but then the challenge is that if it's not contiguous, or to Steve's point, we have those challenges in terms of ground truthing, because there could be a part of the land within an acre that is showing a different biodiversity versus another part of the same land parcel showing a different. So I think that's another important challenge that we've sort of experienced through some of the data that we've collected. So, but yeah, a lot of work to do there.
And I guess Gmo, who's also quite a new member of the collective in a way, put in 2 resources there. I don't know if they're worth it, but we'll write them down as well in the blog post. Okay, 4 minutes and a last question. JP Injuv, I don't know if you're still there, but if you can, maybe come on camera, introduce yourself and ask your question. But yeah, quite a standard one about how are you baselining.
Hey, this is Guy.
Hi.
Yeah, nice to meet you all. I'm with Conservation International, formerly with Indigo Ag. I designed their carbon program. I wrote VM42. Just basic questions about where you're collecting your counterfactual data and what the evidence is. It sounds like you're not using a registry, so maybe there's not a high scale.
So far not, but I think we have to get to that. I think we are looking at both VM42 and 51 and gold standard. So I think, again, a lot of it depends on the project developer as well. So if the project developer says, no, I want this quality of carbon credit and this stuff, we'll have to. So what we've done is basically set up the system so that we can start collecting some of it, but we have not actually. So the historical data, obviously, right now, the only historical data we can get is the satellite data, right? So, so you can go back in time 20 years, up to 20 years, we can get that, but it does not give you the full spectral soil health, as you can tell, right? So that's another challenge in the carbon credits, is that this concept of additionality, to say that, okay, if I have to fund you, you have to prove to me that you're not already organic or regenerative. That's actually sort of a counterintuitive thing, I would say. But I think, so we need to make sure that we have to say, okay, without this money, we could not have gotten better. So we need the money to get better. So I think there's some complexities that we also need to deal with. But yes, to answer your short answer to your question is the historical data only comes from satellites. We can go back to up to 20 years is what.
Well, even soil data is not practice data, and you can't see practices from space.
Yeah.
Or most of them.
Yes.
For instance, fertilizer usage.
So a lot of the carbon registries are mostly going forward is what you can do in many cases. And as you also know, at least the nature-based solutions, most of it is voluntary. There's no, it's not compulsory. So, and the biggest, I would say, carbon stuff is happening in agroforestry, A, and B in biochar. So at least from a nature solution. So we're like somewhat early in this. I would say I know the rice is a big problem, but we're still sort of in the early days of. Early in the industry, I would say. Some of those. So nobody has been given a carbon credit in India for rice production so far. So.
Vijay, thank you so much. Thank you for that presentation. Thank you to the members for being here, to the audience in general for your questions. We'll write this up and post it at the recording as well, and start, asking questions to the members that have some soil knowledge to see if we can organize a little group around that. The last comment.
Yeah, I think Guy, I should definitely connect with Guy. It looks like he has some more insights.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Guy. Thanks, everyone.
And Guy, by the way, I'm not sure you're aware, but CI is a member of ours. I don't know how you got to this event, but definitely join the Slack if you'd like.
Sure.
All right. Well, have a lovely morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, wherever you're at. Thanks again for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao.